One of the most common experiences of grievers is the sense of deep loneliness. And today we're going to explore why this is. And at the end, I'm going to share my suggestions to challenge the loneliness of grief. I'm Jo McRogers, a therapist who specializes in grief support. And if this is your first time here, I'm glad that you have found us. Welcome. And if you are a griever who watches, likes, and shares and subscribes, and then adds comments, I thank you for your time and your trust. You are all helping to let YouTube know the importance of the work that we are doing here, and I can't thank you enough for your kind comments and validation that my videos are of help to you, because it keeps me inspired to keep creating quality content for you all, so thank you. While it is pretty much guaranteed that you will feel lonely while grieving, it's important to know that both grief and loneliness will be different for every individual. Know that I broadly define grief as change not by choice. It can be a diagnosis, the death of a loved person or a pet, a career loss, loss of stable housing, food insecurity, lost relationships, and so many more places that grief grows from. All of these examples can generate grief. And in terms of loneliness, the Encyclopedia of Mental Health defines loneliness as the subjective psychological discomfort that people experience when their network of social relationships is significantly deficient in either quality or quantity, end quote. So loneliness occurs when a person's social relationships don't meet their personal needs. And this is such a frequent experience while we are grieving. Loneliness is defined by what a person wants in relation to what they are experiencing. So whether a person has 100 great family and friends around them, if those people aren't able to deliver the quality or the quantity of support that the griever is needing, that griever is liable to experience loneliness, even when surrounded by masses of people. Silence can be heard the loudest while standing all alone in a crowded room. So here are my top 3 reasons why loneliness is a common experience of grief. Number 1, being understood. It is important to know that no one can actually understand your own grief. Your grief is a constellation of the relationship that you had with the person who has died, the nature of their death, what has been taught to you about grief, what personal beliefs you may have about what happens once someone dies. It includes how you express yourself, how you communicate, and what support system already surrounds you. Grief is built to be a lonely experience. Being lonely is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. And number 2, grief is brain-driven. As much as grief is an emotional process, it is also a biological process. MRI scans of grievers have shown that a little part of our brain called the amygdala is highly activated when we are grieving. And this small but mighty part of our brain plays an important role in grief. The amygdala is implicated in sadness, separation distress, storage of emotional memory, and detecting threats to our attachments. You can see why it's activated when we're grieving. The amygdala necessitates an internal state of self-protection. You may choose to accept a social invite and then cancel. You may need to be alone for private processing. You may think that throwing yourself into crowds or activities is your answer to the loneliness of your grief, only to find yourself feeling even more lonely. Our brains are designed to protect us, so please let the amygdala do its job without judgment. Please know you don't deserve to be lonely, no matter what your grief brain tries to tell you. There is an important difference between insulating yourself in order to protect and integrate your grief versus feeling isolated because others have disappointed you with their response to your grief. This brings us to the number 3 reason why loneliness is common in grief. Number 3, when we are grieving, a natural assumption is that those who know and love us best will be the ones to offer the strongest support. But time after time, this proves to be false. Those closest to us want our pain to stop. They may attempt to fix us, or they have personal discomfort with grief. They may have been taught to keep busy, just to move on, that time heals all myth. They may have unattended grief in their own hearts. So their inability to be present with our grief often leads us to feeling let down the most by people who matter the most. They may not possess the ability to attend to our grief, and they show up deficient in either quality or quantity. There is so much grief work to be done. Please leave a comment below if you can relate to feeling alone or lonely in your grief. Let's all show how common these feelings are while grieving. So, to address these 3 influences, I suggest these 3 thoughts. Number 1, feeling understood. Feeling understood in your grief, oh my goodness, please give yourself the knowledge that it is incredibly important to know that others don't need to understand your grief, but they do need to respect it. Unfortunately, it falls upon you, the griever, to communicate clearly what you need or crave in your grief. And I know that this is a ridiculous ask of the griever. I understand that. But unless you can know what will feel supportive to you and then communicate it, you have slim chances of being supported in a way that feels aligned for you. Knowing and expressing is the only way that others can at least respect your grief. Suggestion number 2 about grief being an internal brain process. Please give yourself permission to experiment with what feels right in terms of time alone and time engaged. And also know that what feels right can change hourly. So please don't confuse alone with loneliness. They have very different needs and very different answers. Be mindful of the difference between insulating yourself protection versus the sense of isolation that comes from the actions of others. And number 3, feeling supported. Grief is a very greedy partner, and it will demand a lot of time alone with you. What you may need is to feel connected with others. And this can come from texts or calls or letters or emails. Be connected without the energy of needing to respond, without needing to be directly engaged. Let those around you know that you appreciate the check-ins, that you appreciate the heart emojis or the meals left at the door or the walks that they give for your dog. Let them know, importantly though, that you will respond and engage as the day or the moment allows. All too often I hear, I'm giving them space. But when we are grieving, we can experience space as a lack of care and concern. We can feel that we're being forgotten about or that it's a dismissal of our grief. And again, it is a big task of the griever. But if you can let those around you know that what you need is connection without the obligation of engagement, you may not be left feeling so alone and lonely. I know that both grief and loneliness are highly personalized experiences, and that I have only touched on this in today's video. So please tell me, what have I missed? What can you offer as insight from your own experiences? Please share your comments below so that we can all learn together. And as you work to address your sense of loneliness while grieving, I send you kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart. Thank you, and I will see you again next time.